Okay, CL Prep Geometry, these are your guided notes for 2.1, and so you want to have this in front of you and be ready to take notes along with it. So, so a topic in 2.1 is conditional statements, and today's the 30th. Statements 2.1. Okay. Conditional statements. Preferred form of hash browns. Definitely of potatoes. I gave away the answer. Definitely hash browns for me. Oh my gosh, I could tell you about these hash browns I had when I was in college. Oh my goodness, I had them a lot. But we'll move on. So these are your objectives. You can read those right now and check them out. You'll pause it if you need to, and we'll start right away. So so what is a conditional statement? So the idea of conditional statements, I gave an example here. If you get 100% on every single test and homework, then you will get an A in the class. This is a true conditional statement for this class. So I want you to ask those 4 questions and say, are any of those things true? Pause the video so you have a chance to read it. So if you look at those, they all should be not necessarily. Like there's none of those statements are definitely true. It doesn't tell you that you're going to get 100%. It doesn't mean you're getting an A. It doesn't mean any of the other ones. It only means one thing, which is that if this first thing happens, so if you get 100% on everything, then you will get an A. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to get an A. That doesn't mean if you don't get 100% on everything, then you won't get an A. It means that, but once you know, someone says, "Oh, I got 100% on absolutely everything in the class," then you know, "Oh, okay, that person must have an A," and it has to be true. There's no way they can't have an A if every grade is 100%, right? So this is a conditional statement. A conditional statement is often called an if-then statement, and the big thing is that when this first part is true, then you know the second part has to be true. But that's it. You don't know the first is true. You don't know if the second is true. You don't know if there's some other way for the second to be true. But once you know that this is true, then you know this must be true. Now, just to give us some vocab, just so we can talk about it easier, this first part, what's underlined right there, without the if, just that what's underlined there is called the hypothesis. And the second part is called the conclusion. Hypothesis and conclusion. And so a true conditional statement is anytime the hypothesis is true, then you know the conclusion has to be true. And there's no wiggle room on this. And also, but it doesn't go any further than that. So if the hypothesis isn't true, you don't know anything. Could the conclusion be true and the hypothesis false? Sure, that's okay. It's just once I know the hypothesis is true, the one thing I'm sure of is the conclusion has to be true, and it can't, and the conclusion can't be false. So there's a way to write this symbolically, which is it's written this way: P then Q. So once you know P is true, that's the hypothesis. Then you know, so that the arrow there is then you know, or this tells you that Q must be true also. You'll see that in the book some. We don't emphasize the symbolic form, but I'm just kind of showing you. And then sometimes it's easy to shorthand things a little bit. So we use it for shorthand to make our lives a little easier, but it's not like a required objective. So, for example, write this as a conditional statement. You think you can borrow the car tonight? Well, you better do the dishes first. Now, so we do these kinds of statements. We like to bring them into real life, and so you have to think about the situation. So you have to say, which is it? Is it if you borrow the car, then you do the dishes, or is it if you do the dishes, then you can borrow the car? And you have to kind of think about it and go, okay, which one is this one meaning? And kind of think about it. And I'd say it was the second. So if you do the dishes, then you can borrow the car. So please notice that I wrote that statement above, you can borrow the car. I wrote the statement above in backwards order. So sometimes that happens. Like something might be written in English backwards, where it's an if-then situation, but just with the language that they used, the conclusion came first and the hypothesis came second. The big thing to notice about it is which one has the if and which one has the then. Although you notice I wrote the dishes and car thing without any if or then in there. And so you have the if and then what was it? Oh, and then think about which one, if you know one is true, then you know the other one has to be true. Now, sometimes in these real life examples, you can get into, well, what if they don't have a car or something? And you could bring up a weird example. So try not to overthink them, and don't try to bring in some weird thing, like, well, what if their car explodes? Or, it's kind of like, okay, lighten up, please. All right. So then the next part, you notice this is switching to purple. So this is the second objective. You can make changes to a conditional statement. So the original is, I left off the if. If I get home more than 5 minutes late, then I'll be grounded. Okay? That's standard conditional statement form. If something, then something. This was actually the rule at my stepmom's house in high school. We can discuss that another time. So now we've got the converse, inverse, contrapositive. What the converse is, so if we call this one, I'm going to shorthand it right now, P, then Q. If P, then Q, right? That's the symbolic form. So P is if I get home more than 5 minutes late, and Q is I'll be grounded. The converse is Q, then P. If Q, then P. The inverse is if not P, then, I should say not P. I don't need the if I'm writing it symbolically. If not P, then not Q. And the contrapositive is if not Q. And a way, I keep writing if, it's not Q. That's a shorthand way of writing not, then not P. That just means not. Okay, look at this first statement as if P, then Q. And then I want you to try to write these ones for this situation, for the being late and grounding thing. What would Q, then P be? So it needs to be if something, then something. And same with the inverse, and same with the contrapositive. Pause the video. I'm going to pause it myself and try to write those things and see how they go, and I'll show you my answers. So I'm pausing it now. Okay, here's the statements. And I will say that sometimes you have to rewrite the tense a little bit to make it sound like decent English. You don't get marked off for questionable writing style, so do your best on it, but and know that you can change the tense a little bit just to make it sound a little better, but you don't but you won't be penalized heavily for this or anything. You won't be penalized at all for your grammar. All right, so remember, P is getting home late and more than 5 minutes late, and Q is getting grounded, right? So Q then P is if I'm grounded, then I was 5 minutes late. I come home, or I see my friends on Monday and they say, hey, how was Saturday night? And I say, oh, I got grounded. Then can they conclude, oh, you must have been more than 5 minutes late? I shorten things up a little bit in the writing. And you'd say, no, I don't think that's true conditional statement, because if you're grounded, you could have been grounded for something else. Like, that's not the only way you can get grounded. And so it seems to me like that's not, I'll say that one's false. Because even if the original is true, and it was true, remember I said this was a true statement in high school. If I was more than home more than 5 minutes late, like on a Saturday night, then I was grounded for 2 weeks. And so now for this one, we'd say this is a false conditional statement because Q could because the hypothesis could be true and the conclusion can be false. And if it's a true conditional statement, once the hypothesis is true, the conclusion has to be true. Then we got the inverse. So, we got the inverse. So that's not P, implies not Q. So if I'm not late, then I won't be grounded. That'd be similar to that first one. If you say, oh, I wasn't late, there's no way I can be grounded. And it's like, no, you can be grounded for something else. Yeah. And then finally the contrapositive, I only got grounded once. And then finally the contrapositive is not Q, then not P. So if I'm not grounded, so I show up on Monday morning, they say, hey, did you get grounded? I say, nope, didn't get grounded. And then I wasn't late. Assuming the original is true. So assuming that if I'm home more than 5 minutes late, then I'm definitely grounded. Then this would have to be true. Because if I show up and I say, oh yeah, I wasn't grounded, it's like, well, you couldn't have been late, because if you were late, you would have been grounded. So if you're not grounded, then you can't be late. That's called the contrapositive. Okay? So that's the converse, inverse, contrapositive. The converse is you switch the places. So you take the hypothesis and conclusion and just swap them. Remember, the if and the then don't come with it. If and the then are separate. It's just the hypothesis and the conclusion. Go. The inverse is you make them the opposite. So not P and not Q. And the contrapositive is you switch them you negate them and then you switch them. So here's my little hand gestures for you. So converse, right? Converse means switch them. Inverse means flip them around. And contrapositive means switch them, negate them, make them the opposite, and trade places, right? So converse, inverse, contrapositive. I actually made that up. It's one of the few things in math I made up. Okay, I'm going to pause here so you have a chance to take a break, and then we'll have a second video with the rest of the material.